The Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast with your host, Rich Decker.
Hello, and thank you for taking some of your valuable time to listen to the show. If you enjoy this show and have been inspired by this episode or another episode, I would encourage you to join our Patreon page. For those who are unfamiliar with Patreon, it's a platform that allows artists and content creators to build relationships with their audience, while at the same time earning enough money to keep providing the content. When you join our community, you will gain access to exclusive content such as live guest Q&As, behind the scenes, and other exclusive offers. And you can join for as little as $1 per month. There's a link in the show notes that'll take you directly to our page. My guest for this episode is Stephen Moore. Stephen is one of the top business coaches in the country. Stephen is a certified business coach and is ranked in the ActionCOACH Top 100 Coaches providing business help, business advice, business coaching, and mentoring services to small and medium-sized businesses. He has a passion for helping businesses grow and become profitable so the business owner can enjoy the lifestyle of their dreams. Stephen's been involved in starting and running numerous companies over the years, multi-million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar companies, and he was one of the founding members of the infomercial industry. I met Stephen about 6 months ago at an NLP training, and meeting him, getting to know him, and seeking his advice has been tremendously helpful, not only in my business, but in my life. This is the hero's journey of Stephen Moore. Be inspired. Well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for joining us today on the Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast. Let's start at the beginning of your journey. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, your family, where you grew up, and what's something your parents instilled in you that's carried you through your journey so far?
Hey, Rich. First of all, I'd just like to say hello, and I'm truly grateful for this opportunity to be with you here today. It's been part of my journey has been meeting you several months ago and being invited onto your really cool show. So I'm most appreciative and grateful. So now if I could remember back to the questions that you just asked me here, I believe that you asked me a question about my childhood and my family. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm a Midwesterner. I'm currently 59 years old at the time that I'm talking to you right now. But I was born in Des Moines, Iowa. I grew up in a little town called Ankeny, which is right outside of Des Moines. And my family, not my direct family, but all my other relatives were farmers. So our life was built around being in our little community during the week, and on the weekends being at my grandfather's or my uncle's, or just being out on the farm and being in that environment of just kind of, I kind of like to refer to it as full-time 24/7 365 a day work, because when you're on a farm, the animals don't rest and the crops don't rest and things just have to get done. And then you mentioned my parents, and my mother grew up on a farm, and my father did not grow up on a farm, but was from farming community and was really an entrepreneur. He was a sheep shearer, and an international award-winning sheep shearer, by the way. People may not realize that exists, but it did way back then. I'm sure it exists now. But he would arrange crews, and they would travel all over the Midwest and the South and shear the sheep and provide wool and have contests and see who could shear the sheep without the least amount of cuts, the least aggravation, and provide the most wool in the shortest amount of time. So he was always entrepreneurial from that respect. And so I guess that's where my journey really started on entrepreneurship or business, was just from the day I was born till now. That's the best way that I can describe it at this point.
Growing up on a farm and in that family is what has been your basic value as far as your approach to business and life?
I think it's had a lot to do with it, because, on the farm, and like with my father, eventually he wasn't a sheep shearer, and he opened a restaurant in Iowa. But if you didn't work, if you didn't produce, you didn't get paid. I mean, there was no handout. There was, nothing, that would be given to you. So I think that instilled a lot. And I also think that I didn't come from a family of parents that worked in a job, so to speak. So I didn't really know what that was like. Although my friends and the neighbors, their parents had jobs. Like my best friend Johnny, his father had a job at the welder shop, and the next door neighbors at Brian's, his father worked in the school. So he was a teacher, a coach, a sports coach in the school. So they had jobs. My parents were just kind of different because they didn't have jobs. They had businesses, or they were farmers, that type of thing. So I really, I think it shaped the way that I think from, just like I said, since the day I was born. The only real job that I had that I consider a job was when I was in high school. There was a guy up the street, Kay Blackman, and I was mowing his yards, and he's like, this is in high school. And this is when we had moved to Phoenix, Arizona back in 1973, and mowing yards to get money and all this kind of thing. And he said, how'd you like to get some more money, work on the weekends? And like I said, I was in high school. I'm like, yeah, sure. So he owned a U-Haul. So it was just himself and me on the weekends, operating this U-Haul and putting on hitches on cars and parking trucks and renting trailers and, doing all kinds of stuff. So I really learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from my father, learned a lot from uncles, from my grandfather, and my grandmothers. I had a whole host of people that I learned work ethic from, and not only work ethic, but getting results. Like I said, if you didn't get results, nobody was going to step up and give you money and take care of you. So I think that's where that came from.
So growing up on a farm, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a kid?
Great question. And I had no idea. I mean, I literally had no idea. When we moved from Iowa to Phoenix, Arizona, when I was 15 years old. And I thought at that time that I was going to go into architecture. And the reason that kind of came about, we had a neighbor that taught drafting and architecture in the high school. And he was a really good friend, and a really good instructor. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. You design things. And I think that started tapping into some of my creative parts of my brain, if you will. And then I got really, really interested in music in high school. I didn't do sports like football or anything like that. I've got a couple of congenital back issues that didn't prevent it, but it wouldn't have been a good idea. And so I was always involved in music. I played the bass guitar, learned tuba, learned clarinet, a little bit of piano. I'm not a virtuoso at it or anything, but it started shaping that up. And I got really involved with music toward the end of high school, and then into the beginning of DeVry University, and actually had a band. And then I got into audio recording. And at that point in my life, I thought that I'm like, wow, this is going to be my career, is to be an audio recording engineer and work in the music industry. That was the first real sign as to what I wanted to do, was at that point in life.
Well, let me step back a little bit. So your parents, they sold the farm and moved to Arizona. That seems like a big change from the Midwest to here. What prompted that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Let me correct a little bit. My parents didn't own a farm. Their parents did, and their brothers and sisters, my uncles and my grandparents did. But my father and my mom, my father had a sheep shearing business and then a restaurant. And he has some pretty severe back problems with arthritis in his back. And the cold of the Midwest and the moisture of the Midwest was really taking his toll on his body because of the work that he had done with the sheep shearing business. So they really bit the bullet, and it was a really tough decision for them to move to Arizona. But the reason they did was it was for health reasons. I mean, either my father was going to, become crippled or die an early death or be in just severe pain, or find a better place to live. So they were very brave, and they moved, myself and my brother and my sisters. We all moved to Arizona. It was really traumatic because it was in high school. But once we got to Arizona, it was in January, and it was like, wow, there's no snow. There's no ice. This is so cool.
Yeah, you could wear shorts in January.
Shorts and t-shirts. And it was just like, wow, this is a really cool place. And I had never really seen a cactus before. I'd seen them on TV or cartoons, but if you've never really seen something before, you don't really have a concept of it. So Arizona was really cool when we first came to it. It's still really cool. I've lived here ever since. I've had businesses elsewhere, but I've always maintained a residence here. So the difficulty of moving here was it was health related, and then my father, he really didn't do so well here in Arizona as far as owning businesses and things like that. It didn't pan out for him that well, but he always became like a manager of a restaurant chain, or he worked for a really large used auto parts supply company here in Arizona, which is basically a glorified way of saying they're junkyards and they part out cars. And he was the COO of that company for quite a while, and now he's still alive and he's retired in Sun City. So yeah, it was a big move, and it was a big jolt to us. But all aside, the weather and just the beautiful place to live in was just fantastic.
So you got into music. What was the attraction to music for you?
I think it was the creative part of the brain. It was that it's like being home. It's like, yeah, this is where I belong. This is, being creative, being in productivity on a creative level. That was the real interest for me. Plus, it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and being around other people that are creative and productive, and like a band or in a recording studio session. You have a producer, you have arrangers, you have musicians, you got songwriters, you got all these people, and they all have to collaborate. They all have to work together on a certain scale, and you create a final product. And I'd never really experienced that before. Yes, on a farm, you work together and you plant the seeds, and it's a long-term process, and you raise animals, and it's a long-term process. But in my first real collaborative process was in music, and I just loved it. And I didn't really turn out to be a musician. I turned into the more toward the engineering side, and that's where I really excelled at that point in my life.
So were you active as an engineer in the music industry here in Arizona or in LA or something like that?
Yes. I've always been the kind of person that's been, for the most part, in the right place at the right time, around the right people, with the right opportunity, and whether I could do something or not, I just always jumped in. So I was introduced, I was working with a band here in town, and there was another gentleman, Alan Moore. He worked at a piano repair center here in Arizona, but he had a little studio in a little rental house. And I met him, and he invited me over, and I started to learn audio recording with him, and then he introduced me to one of the larger studios here in Phoenix, Arizona. It was actually in Paradise Valley, Arizona, called Chaton Recording Studio, Ed Ravenscroft. And really, really nice studio. And then I got introduced to Pantheon Recording Studio, which was another studio, but in Paradise Valley. So between Pantheon and Chaton, I settled into Chaton and helped develop. I got to cut the story short because I could talk about this for like 2 days straight. But long story short of it, I worked myself up to be a chief engineer, helped develop a recording truck. I broadcast the Phoenix Symphony. I did demos and albums for all kinds of major acts and groups that were traveling. This was the late 70s, early 80s, all the way from like Hall & Oates to, oh gosh, now the names are slipping to me. I used to do the demos for Rob Halford of Judas Priest, they're still around and kicking well. I worked with Steve Vai from Frank Zappa. There were a lot of people that would summer here, or winter here, if you will, not summer here. And they would cut demos and work on things. And the biggest opportunity that I had was, there was a gentleman by the name of Lyle Lovett, and a producer that I was working with, Billy Williams. I was working with Billy quite a bit in the studio, and he said, "Yeah, I'm bringing in this guy to cut some demos. His name is Lyle Lovett." And we used all the local musicians here in the Valley who are now on a national stage, even Grammy Award winning, this type of thing. But I got introduced to Lyle, and I engineered his first couple of albums, and did quite well with it, and made some lifelong relationships, and just loved the biz. And I got to a point where I was recording live concerts and then interfacing with video trucks, and life was good. There was just the only thing that kind of hit me at a certain point was there was a ceiling as to how much I could make being a recording engineer, and I just had a desire to do more than that at a certain point.
So, I always wondered, I worked briefly in the film industry here in Arizona, and I know the music and the film. I wonder why it never really took off and became bigger than it did, because, it's so close to LA. It seems like it'd be, economically speaking, it'd be like a good idea to have that kind of industry here. Why do you think it never really took off?
Well, actually it did. You just didn't know about it.
Oh, okay. Oh, it did. Okay.
Actually, it did. There have been many recordings and many albums and from many groups from the '60s on, even to today, that have been done here. It's just that it's not advertised or anything like that. I have a really good friend, Otto D'Angelo, Otto D, and he was responsible for bringing Run DMC and Aerosmith back into the forefront. With some innovative stuff that he did quite a long time ago. But the studio I worked at, Chaton, Otto eventually bought it out and ran that, I think, up until 2012 or 2014, something like that, and produced all kinds of hits and albums and CDs or iTunes tunes, whatever you want to call it now. The film industry has always been very strong here in Arizona. It's not just movies. Most of the major car manufacturers do all their, not all, but a good portion of all their film shoots or digital now shoots here in the different environments of Arizona, because we have all seasons here in Arizona and all environments in different parts of the state. So it's just, you don't really hear about it that much. But I've worked in LA for, quite extensively in production and, at certain parts of the companies that I've had, and I've worked here, and it's really no different other than in LA at a certain point in time, you could do anything 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, whereas here it was a little bit different. But there are huge pockets of success here, as there are in other states around here also.
Well, I stand corrected. Now, when you decided that, I can only make so much money as an engineer, what did you decide to do then?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I learned real fast that unless you're a songwriter or a performer and you have points on an album or an arranger or a producer or something like that, there's no royalty stream, and which is where all the money is. And so I learned right away that being in my early 20s and earning $35 an hour, then $50 an hour, then $70 an hour, yeah, it's really cool when you're in your early 20s, but who wants to be 60 years? Well, I shouldn't say who wants to be. There are many people that would love to be a recording engineer in their 50s or 60s, and it's just that you'd have to accept the level of compensation at that point. And I just wanted more. So I was always meeting people and in the recording in the recording industry here in Phoenix and Paradise Valley and all kinds of other stuff. And I met a guy, and he's like, hey, I'm doing some video stuff, and could you do the audio for it? And I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And so I worked in a video truck with him and doing the audio and all this. And then I'm like, wow, video is cool. And then I learned right away, there's more money in video. And there's a lot of money in producing and directing video. And I was meeting a lot of people that had video needs. And this one guy that he had a friend that I was doing a demo for in the recording studio, and he said, hey, would you happen to know, I need to shoot this video, and we're going to advertise winning at blackjack. And it's kind of a new thing that's going on, and do you know how I could get set up to do that? And I just blurted right out, because of a lot of contacts that I had made over the several months and everything. I'm like, yeah, I can arrange that for you, which I really had no experience in doing it. but there was an opportunity, and I'm like, this guy is asking for help. And I may not be the exact guy, but I know how to get it done, and I know how to pull all these other resources together. And so that was my first delve into direct marketing, infomercial, video production world, if you will. And so that's what I did. And that at the same time that I was working with him on this, he's like, "Do you know anybody that can duplicate our videotapes?" And I knew this other guy, Dennis, and I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And so I started a videotape duplicating business. And Dennis wasn't really in a position to be an owner of it, so I owned it. He helped with it, and we put together Arizona Tape Duplicating. So I had a video duplicating company going, which was duplicating tapes for speakers and for how-tos for people that were doing things. This was back in the mid 80s, 84, 85, 86, if I recall. And then for schools, we were duplicating tapes for schools. So it turned into a pretty substantial business. And as I got more involved in the video business and the video duplicating business, I wasn't as interested in, from a financial standpoint, the audio recording business, the engineering business. And it's really kind of sad because in a way, that's where my heart lies. I mean, but if you would say, Stephen, what is it that, if you had only one thing you could work on and we didn't have money anymore, what would it be? I'd be in the recording studio working with producers, arrangers, and musicians working on music. It's not that I lost interest. It's just that I had a bigger aspiration in other areas, and I saw a future in it. And I got a taste of actually owning my own company for the first time, and all the headache that it involved and all the work that it involved, but all the payoff that it involved. And that was the first company that I sold to, was the videotape duplicating business. I sold it to a public company after about 3 years of being in business. They approached me and told me how much market share we had, and were really impressed. And they were out of Minneapolis and said, "We're public, so we can buy you, or we can build one of our facilities here in town and put you out of business." So they made me a really good offer. We negotiated for a couple of days, and I sold it. I got some royalties out of it and was happy because then it allowed me to have more time, more capital to work in my video business and the direct marketing infomercial space. And so it worked out really well for me.
You bring up a point. I think what gets lost often when we talk about business is relationships. That seems to me, that's the cornerstone of everything, is relationships, but especially in business, because you wouldn't have gotten to where you were without the relationships you had. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's business and commerce is built on relationship. It's the business partner that I had, Michael Levy, for a long time. Like I said, I'd worked on a couple of infomercials, winning at blackjack, and some real estate infomercials at that time. And somebody said, Bobby, who was the winning at blackjack infomercial person, he said, "We're going to LA. We're going to meet this guy, Mike Levy, and he's got a cosmetic company, and we think we can do an infomercial with him. And could you come along and help us out to explain the process and how it all goes?" So we go to Canoga Park, and we go to, it's called California Cosmetics, and we walk in and we get led over to Michael's office, and we all walk in, and I reach over and I shake hands with Michael, and we both knew right then and there that we were going to be friends for life, and that we were going to do business together for the rest of our lives. It was like instantaneous relationship. There was just something that clicked right then and there. And that's really where my first real serious, and I use the word serious business relationship and venture took off, was right at that moment.
How did you know that the infomercials would be as big as it was going to be, or did you know?
We had no idea. we had no idea.
I mean, because if anybody's ever owned a TV, which is just about everybody, everyone's seen an infomercial at some point or another. If they were up at 2 a.m., they've seen an infomercial at some point. It's still big now. Is that correct? I don't really watch TV much anymore, but it's still big now, right? They have whole channels for it.
Oh yeah, I mean the infomercial business. I like to refer to it as the direct marketing business. So it doesn't matter if it's on television, cable, radio, internet, Facebook, LinkedIn. Yeah, I mean you name it. That's the infomercial business. We're to a certain sense we're all in the infomercial business. So yeah, we had no idea that it would grow to the level that it grew. At the time, this was back in 1985. And people were always telling us after a year or 2 years or 3 years, it's like, oh, it's not going to exist anymore. Oh, it's not going to exist anymore. And we just ignored it because it's like, look, we're fulfilling a need. We're pointing out a dissatisfaction. We're providing a vision or a product that would solve that. We're giving you some first steps so that you can order it easily, get it delivered to your home. Don't got to go out and see it. And entertaining. Our programming. It was actually a series. It was called Amazing Discoveries, and then later Ask Mike. But we produced really fun infomercials that were crazy, zany, wacky, and we sold, tens of thousands of units of product every week all over the U.S. And then eventually we went public, and then we had programming in 60 countries, 12 languages. I mean, it grew to quite a large venture, entrepreneurial venture, if you will. And it was a lot of fun. It wasn't always easy, and there was a lot of stress that was involved in it. But for the most part, it was a lot of fun. And like everything with all success, there's ups, there's downs, there's everything to it. But in the beginning, we had no idea, and we did so many things wrong, and we learned from it, and we improved, and everything along those lines. I mean, if we could fail at something, we would, and failure in the infomercial world, there are very few people that do infomercials or direct marketing that actually make it. And for whatever reason, we were a combination of team that we had, I think at one point we had an over 80% track record of success with all the infomercial projects that we were working on. And that's unheard of even to this day in the industry to have that type of success. So, again, it was a combination of just a few people in the beginning. We had a common interest, and we all just wanted to make it work and have fun and make a whole lot of money and do a lot of things and travel all over the world and see what we could do. And we did it. And that was the driving force of it, which now it's just so much different where my thinking is at and my mentality is at, in that, having more of a vision for something and putting together a team and a plan and learning even more. At that time, it was just, like I said, we were in the right place at the right time with the right set of ideas and the right action to make it happen.
So you sold your business. You're having this tremendous success with the direct marketing. What are some of the downsides of success that people often don't think about?
Believing that you're really good. There's something that I've learned the hard way, and like most business owners learn. When things are going good, it's good that things are going good. When they're going excellent, it's great that things are going good. But that's the time when you have to do all the what ifs, and you've got to sit down and you've got to work with other people to work with you and say, okay, this is where we're going, and things are going so good, and we're on such a stride. And you kind of forget that things can go wrong, and things can go sideways, or there can be government intervention, or there can be competition that takes over because you're not being innovative enough, or that flat out you're just not reinventing or what is the word that I want to use? Just figuring out new ways to refresh and make things, adapt to the times that you're moving into, so that you don't become a buggy whip, that type of thing. So that's what happens. You can be on this great trend of success, but if you don't keep the innovation up, if you don't keep reinventing, and you get complacent, it's like, yeah, this is great. We're a public company. We're doing this. We're not doing that. And you start believing too much into that. Yeah, we're just successful. I mean, it's good to believe that in success and that you're successful, but you also have to look back at, okay, well, what could happen? What could be the worst thing that happens right now, and prepare for that. And just, you have to start looking at a different mindset. Just like when you're at the rock bottom, you have to take your mind and you have to say, mind, what would it be like if this happened, and what would it be like if I took this action and we made this happen? You kind of swap. Okay, so when you're at the bottom, you look toward how to be successful and how you can get out of being at the bottom. And when you're in the upper successful part, you look at, well, what could take it away, and how do we have to re-innovate? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. When you're telling your story, I think about the story of Encyclopedia Britannica. The people that were running that company when the internet first came around said, "Oh, it's just a fad." And where's Encyclopedia Britannica now? They're basically non-existent, right?
Yeah. Or you could look at it from the standpoint somebody it's gone through several generations of Wikipedia and Google now.
Yeah, and Wikipedia is unreliable resource.
Oh, absolutely.
What happened with the direct marketing company? Where did you decide you wanted to do something else, or?
Well, life goes on. Life evolves. So, very successful business. Like I said, we went public in the early '90s. Then we were acquired as a wholly owned subsidiary with a company on the New York Stock Exchange. It was called National Media, then changed to E4L. Kevin Harrington was the president of the company at that time. He went on to start Shark Tank, and still to this day do a lot of direct marketing and work with innovative products. It was all part of our group. But what happened was that although we were a wholly owned subsidiary, which basically meant that we worked on our programming and we did the best we could and still had a very vigorous business and all this. But some of the other business dealings with the company that acquired us took them down, which in return took our company down at the same time. So I got out in 1998, just kind of decompressed for a year and a half, and did some soul searching. And in the meantime, got back into a little bit of music engineering and built a post-production studio in the home that I had in Scottsdale, Arizona. And then I hooked up with, again, it's all about relationship, with one of my best friends, Tim Jasinski, and we decided to, hey, let's get back in the infomercial business. Let's just do it here in the United States, and let's work in the business opportunity space. And because that's where some of his expertise was. Not some, that's where a great amount of his expertise. Brilliant creative guy. And he said, you've got a much more extensive business background on the actual operations of the business and production business, and all that. So we collaborated together and we formed a company called Direct Effects Television. And then from 2000 to 2010, again, we were one of the largest, I'm not going to say largest infomercial company, but we were the largest infomercial company in the business opportunity space here in the United States. We did about $500 million worth of business. Previously, before that, with the public company and Positive Response Television, and we did over $2.5 billion worth of business in that time period. So, just really good numbers. And so that's what I did from 2000 to 2010. And Tim and I worked really well together, and we built up a sizable company. But what was really cool in the 2000s was that, unlike before, where we had to build everything from the ground up, we had to build fulfillment center, we had to build outbound telemarketing, we had to build production company, accounting, media buying company, all these things. Well, the beauty of it, by the time the 2000s rolled around, we could just use an outsourcing model. So with just, under 10, a team of 10 employees, we could operate a $500 million company by outsourcing all of our needs, like inbound telemarketing, outbound telemarketing, fulfillment centers, you name it. We always kept the post-production facility in-house. We had a physical in-house post-production facility, because it went from having to spend $5 to $10 million on a post-production facility to only having to invest like $500,000 at that point in time. And of course, the costs have even come down from there. But that's what we did in the 2000s. We were really, really, really successful at doing that too.
So you've started a few companies. What I know there's many factors involved, but for you, what's the key for having a successful business, and why do most fail?
Oh, passion. Passion is one of the reasons that companies succeed, or teams succeed, or partners or an individual succeeds, is the passion, and be able to have some type of vision. Hey, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing, and energize that into other people so that they'll work along with you to build that. That's always been, things that I've been passionate about. I've always run into or met or been associated with other people that are just as passionate about it. And they've had other skills and other opportunities and relationships that they bring to the table. And that's really how, any successful business really starts in the beginning. I mean, think about it. Microsoft, they started, were they a garage start or something like that? And it was because you had a bunch of guys that were passionate about coding, about figuring something out. That's how businesses, start. Now, most often, and this is my experience, businesses fail because of, well, number one, because of burnout and the lack of funding, the lack of being able to either self-fund or grow on yourself or acquire financing or investors or something like that. Because what'll happen is you'll get to a certain point, and if there's not the foundation and the structure and the systems and other things in the business to where you can get financing or you can self-finance, as we always did. We just always self-financed because it was direct marketing, such a quick turnaround at that point in time, to where we really didn't need outside funding until we went public, and we did that so that we could gain control of a lot more media at the time, get that cash infusion, so that we had many more millions of dollars, so we could just buy out media all over the place and control it. But really, business failure is due to burnout. People don't plan ahead enough. They don't learn enough. They don't reach out enough, and they're underfunded. They have a certain amount of money, and they've got a burn rate, and they're inexperienced, and they don't reach out to get enough help or consulting or mentoring or coaching, and they just burn through it. And then it's just you're back to working for somebody again. I mean, I see that all the time. I'm going through a campaign right now where, as a business coach, I'm calling on some larger construction companies here in the Phoenix area, some commercial construction companies, and some of them that I'm calling at are going out of business as we speak. So it's really disheartening, and I know the reasons why, and it's because of not a cohesive vision, and they just don't have it together as far as a team and a plan. They were good at what they did, and that got them so far, and then it didn't get them any farther. That's usually what happens.
Well, that's ironic because everywhere you look, somebody's building something. It would seem odd that a company would be going out of business that is a builder or construction company.
Oh yeah, but it happens every day. Just think about it. Just sometime when you're driving up the street, you're traveling across town. This could be any city. Just driving across town, you'll see new businesses opening up, and you'll see other ones that the doors are closed, or they're like, for rent or for lease, and you'll see where the old sign was because of the paint marks on the walls and stuff. It's just, as there are businesses closing every day. I mean, the stats are proven, are definitely proven. Within the first 5 years, 80% of all businesses fail.
You believe because of they lack the vision and the passion. Is that the key factor, you think?
Well, I think it's not. I wouldn't say it's a key factor, but where it really comes from was not a good enough plan, or no plan, and not enough education and learning and mentoring along the way to help out. That's the key. I mean, if there's one thing that I've learned, that is the key at this point in time.
So you start having a little bit of success, and you think that you're the reason for that success, basically, instead of relationships and like you said, education and everything else.
Yeah, well, in most cases, you are the reason for that success, but that'll only get you so far. That's only gotten anybody so far. Really successful people, they learn, they have a passion for learning, they listen, they know what they don't know. And I would say that that's probably, now that it comes to mind, knowing that you don't know, recognizing what you don't know, and finding the expertise to fill that void, or to learn, or to adapt, or to hire, and work yourself out of every position that you're doing currently. That's how you become successful.
Well, let's go back to 2008. It was a difficult time for a lot of people. How did that affect you and your businesses or business? Or I know it had an impact on you. Is that correct?
It did on so many people of so many levels. From 2008 to 2011, the direct marketing infomercial world was shook up by several things. Number one was the Federal Trade Commission had been working on changing and re-regulating advertising, not just in direct marketing or infomercial space, but all advertising, and they did. And I won't go into details in it, but it really restricted what we could do as far as testimonials and what could be said, and all that type of thing. And it basically shut down the business opportunity space that we were in. It wasn't the only thing that shut it down. What really happened, and it didn't affect us until later in 2009, where a lot of businesses were affected in 2008. The television advertising business really wasn't affected until 2009. And I think it was either May or June of 2009. I remember we had so much media out, and we're kind of preparing for the storm. We're like, wow, our response from our television programming is not taking that much of a hit. And you have to realize I'd been through the 87 hit, the 9/11 hit, and other hits that had taken place on a global and national level that really didn't affect our business that much for very long. And then 2008, we're seeing all this stuff happen, and the panic and the elections, and then the banks and failing, or all on the verge of failing, and the government walking in, and we're going, when's it going to hit us? When's it going to hit us? And so we're thinking, okay, well, when it does, we can we can ride it out for about a year and a half, 2 years. We've got the ability to do that. Well, remember, with media in the direct response industry, you have to pay cash for it. There's no credit, and you buy it out 6 weeks, 12 weeks at a time. So you've got several $1 million sitting out there that's already paid for, and they don't give you refunds, right? And I remember getting the reports. Like I said, it was either May or June, and our response rate in 1 week period dropped 80% on our advertising. 80%. I've never seen that before, ever. And there wasn't much that we could do to pull back. We were running a pretty slim team because we were outsourcing model, and we just went ghost white, and we lost a lot of money because we couldn't resell the advertising because nobody was buying it. A lot of media agencies that have been in business for 20 some odd years went out of business. There were a lot of people in the direct marketing infomercial space that went out of business at that time, and we actually went out of business in that time too. But it wasn't because of that. The reason that we went out of business, and this is something that was a really hard lesson for me, was that my partner Tim and we didn't have the same vision for the business moving forward. And where I was really grooming the business to be bought out at a certain time, and building the team with systems so that we could do plug and play products into it, whether they're hard products or business opportunity products, whatever the case may be. It was really building the business so that we could do that. Whereas Tim looked at it from a different thing, where he just wanted to do more infomercials and wanted me to produce more infomercials. And that's not why I was in the business. It was more to build a business that we could eventually exit from. The problem was we should have known that from day one when we started doing business together, 10 years prior. So, and we didn't. So when all the pressure came to bear of what happened for us in the 2009 era, it was really a lot of pressure. And because we didn't have this cohesive vision on what we were really doing with the company, we broke apart. And it was painful at first, until reality set in. It's like, well, this is what we're going to do. And so we worked on a wind up that took many years to wind up, and we successfully wound everything up. And at the time, we had commercial properties and all kinds of things. So it was a big learning experience. It was it really shifted my mind into better mentorship, and then business coaching, and that whole arena of, wow, I wish I had certain things in place, and I wish I had better mentoring, and I wish that I had, business coaching, because what happened to me is that I reached my threshold in the 2009. I had reached my threshold of knowledge and limited amount of help that I was getting and mentoring that I was getting. And had we had more of that, say even 5 years earlier, say back in 2004, 2005, I believe that Tim and I would still have that business together and we'd still be thriving with it. But that's what happens. You asked earlier why businesses fail. That is firsthand knowledge and experience of how a business can fail. And I'm not going to say it was a true failure, because while we failed in the end to continue, we had a really great 10-year run of success. Could we have more? And could we had, a really big payoff exit strategy, of acquisition by somebody else, or a merger by a public company, or another larger infomercial company? Yeah, that would have been a bigger payoff in the end. So yeah, we did fail, in that respect on the exit of it. We were successful in the 10 years of it. But like I said before, and I'll say this again, 80% of all businesses fail in the first 5 years. In the next 5 years, 50% of those that are left fail. And at the 10-year mark, and going past it, a great percentage of those businesses then fail, or the business owners just carry it at a certain level and never increase it, and they're tied into it at that point for the rest of their lives, or as long as it goes on. So that was the lesson from the 2008 era, if you will, for me.
Now, looking back, it seems like, it's obvious that things were going to collapse with everything that was going on. Why didn't more people see it? And what do you think is the next big bubble?
Wow. Well, in thinking back, you have to realize nobody predicted it. Nobody predicted. They made a movie about one guy that predicted it, and everybody thought he was crazy. And and for people that don't know that era, the real estate was going off the charts. The increases in value of real estate on a residential and commercial level were going off the charts. We had started years before in designing our commercial space that we were building. And unfortunately, it was completed in 2009. So it was basically worthless once we got it done, because the crash had taken place. But the ether in the air of success for so many years in the recovery that was going on from 9/11, it was like, we were getting really good consulting from, really good attorneys, really good real estate people, commercial real estate people, really good CPA and accounting, and people just didn't have enough attention or pay enough attention to what was really going on. And there were a lot of people, their entire life was destroyed, because of it. So it seemed that it was a time period when all the blinders were on with everyone, or a great amount of people, even people, way high up in Wall Street that were just crushed, that had seen crushes before, but nothing like this. Cause if you'll remember the whole presidential election was based on, look, we just crashed out. We had two presidential cycles of President Bush, and then everything collapsed at the end of his presidency. And, it wasn't just a U.S. collapse. It was an entire worldwide collapse. So we went from being on top of the world and had I think if there were more attention paid to of, okay, we're riding the success. And I'm just not talking about us. I'm talking about everybody in general. We're riding high on the wave. What could go wrong? What are we not looking at? What should we be looking at? How could this collapse? How could this go wrong? Unfortunately, there were some real exotic finance and schema of loans and the ratings of it that were done on a very high level. They were called tranches that the average person or even really savvy business people wouldn't have known about in the Wall Street banking world, but that eventually had AAA grade paper that was basically junk. And by the time everybody realized it, it was too late, and the trickle down just went down. And it went down so hard that even on television, we couldn't even sell a product for $9.97. I mean, it got that bad.
So do you think it's ego that people just, well, we're success, nothing can go wrong type of thing, everything's great? Is it that or something else?
Well, I think that's part of it. I think people who have prolonged success always look at planning. How could we do better? How could we innovate more? What can I learn? Who can I get to help me? And they always question, what are the signs? What's going on? When other businesses are failing, what caused them to fail? Who can we talk to? Who can we meet with? Who can we get training from? What can I learn? If once you stop doing that, then you stagnate, and sooner or later, boom, you crash out.
So you can't just study the success stories; you got to study the failures as well, or the as we learned in the NLP, there is no failure, only feedback. You got to study the feedback as well.
Correct. Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. That's why reading and even audible listening and things like that to people's experiences and their stories of what happened, history, what's happened in the past. One of the things that really, one of our successes in the infomercial industry back from the 80s and early 90s was we would just research products, and we kind of realized it's like, hey, there's really not that many new products. They just kind of recycle every 6 to 8 years in a different form. And so that's what we based a lot of the products that we sold on television off of, was just research and repackaging it and reformatting it and putting a different spin on it, if you will, and showing people, giving them information so that they could make a buying decision and purchase from us. That's what we did. But your statement was about more toward failure, and I think it's just, there's one word that sums it all up. It's just getting complacent. If you realize that you're complacent with where you're at in life and your business, watch out, because something's going to happen, and more than likely something bad is going to happen.
So where do you think the next bubble is? I hear stuff about the student loans and all this stuff.
Boy, if I could predict that, I'd be a really rich man. from that standpoint, yeah. I really, that's a really good question, Rich. I think it's probably outside the scope of my expertise at this point in time. From what I do read, though, the debt, credit card debt, student loan debt, getting in debt for something that you can't then utilize to pay it off. Because I believe that, debt is just another business tool as long as it's used as a tool. So, if you go, you mentioned student debt, if you go get into debt for, 50,000, well, 25,000, 50,000, 200,000, 300,000, $500,000, whatever it is for the education that you think that you're going to utilize, and then you don't, or you didn't do enough research to see that that's probably not a good idea because there's not much opportunity in the future for there, when you probably could have gone to a trade school or just not even gone to college, just concentrated and educated in a certain area and became a leader at it and made a business out of it. Those are, we got some pretty big bubbles out there with student debt and from what I've read lately with credit card debt at an all-time high again. I think from the people that I've spoken to in the real estate industry, even though that there's a lot of creative financing coming back into the market, the valuations are good, and the equity that people have are good from that standpoint. So I don't know if we're due for another real estate bubble. We're going to have another real estate bubble and an economic bubble at some point. It's just that whoever is going to truly be able to predict that and give solutions and action items to take on that, they'll be wealthy. They'll have a big following. They'll sell a lot of books at a certain point, for sure.
What led you into wanting to become a business coach?
Yeah, really, again, just a great point, great question. I had, in the early 2000s, we met Brad Sugars, who was the founder of ActionCOACH. He was exploring doing an infomercial. And actually, a company that we were working with was looking at possibly an infomercial with him. And so Tim and I went and we got to enjoy a week with Brad up in Las Vegas. He was living up there, which is now where the global Action Global is based. But we spent a week together, and we realized it's like, look, we're having a good time, and we're really getting to learn a lot about you. But this really isn't a general infomercial product that would be able to be sold on television to the mass. This is more of a vertical product, and we all agreed. It's like, yeah, this isn't something that would be ripe for it. So it kind of planted my seed. I learned a lot about what he was doing in building ActionCOACH up, and the global reach that they had in doing the pre-production, all the systems that we would go through before we would see if we would take on an infomercial project or if it was viable, our due diligence, so to speak. So I just got a taste of it. And it would have been actually a really good opportunity to engage Brad and his team to coach us at the time. When I look back at it, if there's a regret that I have, that's one of the regrets. It's like, wow, where would we be now if we were coached by Brad Sugars or part of the ActionCOACH team? We'd be in a much different place, I'm sure. That's what my first introduction to business coaching. And then really when we got hit hard in 2009, and I had to do a lot of soul searching, and I had worked with some startups after that up in Utah with some ventures, and got them up and running and did well with it. And then they'd crash and burn a bit, and whether it was from somebody dying and not having proper succession in the place, and things that we had always been taught to do with the companies we had previously, because we had good counsel, we had good advisors, we had good mentors. And it just kind of opened my eyes up to that, wow, people go out and they just start businesses, and they don't really consult, and they don't get advice, they don't get mentored, they don't get coached. And so right then and there, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, John Burley. He lives in Glendale, Arizona, and he's one of the top real estate people globally. He's worked with Donald Trump on his books, Robert Kiyosaki books. He's worked with Brad on his real estate systems, and John's just an all around great guy. And we did an infomercial with John in the 2000s. We did quite well with it, and so he's always been a good friend. And we were just, like I said, I was soul searching. I was consulting with John and talking, and he's like, maybe you should just look into business coaching. And so I did, and I contacted ActionCOACH because of my experience with Brad Sugars, and it took about a year of research and really looking into it and seeing what it would be like. And that was back in back in the 2014, 2015 era at that point. And then I decided to jump all in, and I've done that ever since.
I have learned the hard way the importance of having not only mentors, but coaches. And, if I think as you've mentioned in this talk, if you start to think you know everything, you're in trouble. So how do you know? I think even like if you don't have a business, getting a coach of some kind or a mentor of some kind just for life is important. How do you know who's a good coach and who maybe is not such a great coach?
Let me approach it from this standpoint, because that is just such an incredibly great question, because there are so many people that call themselves coaches out there, whether it's business, life, career, whatever. And so you've got to do your research. You've got to do your homework. Would you go to an attorney? Would you hire an attorney that never worked on say you've got an injured case? Would you hire an attorney that does taxes to work on your injury case? I don't think so. So would you confide in a psychologist or who you think is a practicing psychologist or therapist, and then you find out that they paid $500 and got certified online? Would that be somebody that you would want to work with? So you got to do your research, and that kind of brings me up to ActionCOACH. One of the reasons ActionCOACH is a global franchise, and currently they're in, not just we're currently in 80 countries. Latest company country that we just added was Vietnam. And so when I looked at becoming a business coach, and John, said, look at Brad's company, look at where it's going. Number one, formed in 1993, global. So to date, as of when I'm talking to you right now on this recording, been in business for over 26 years, extremely successful, is one of the top 50 franchises in the world, has thousands of coaches. The company as a whole, as an organization, we coach, teach, learn, plan, strategize on a weekly basis with tens of thousands of business owners. So we have a brain trust. We have our own online portal internal to us. We have a brain trust of what works, proven systems, proven methodologies. It's not cookie cutter because every business is unique. I could take two Subways, two different owners. Well, the same basic coaching would have to take place. It's going to be different because they're two different people. They have to be coached in different areas differently. But when you look at the intellectual property that Action Coach has, when you look at the track record, when you look at the resource that I have internally within Action Coach to ask any coach within our organization any question of experience, in our internal forums, in our training, in our conferences that we have that nobody else has, when it comes from a coaching company, that's what you have to ask yourself. If I'm going to coach, if I'm going to get business coaching, who am I going to get business coached by? You've got to do the research and the homework and look at the successes, look at the testimonials, look at the areas of success of that company. Because in 2018, we won the top business coaching firm. Tony Robbins was number 2. We were number 1. And we don't do exactly the same thing. Okay. With Action Coach, our goal, our main goal with the business owners that we coach, the companies that we coach, is to, create a commercial profitable enterprise that works without them. In other words, get them outside of the business so that they're solely working on the business so that they can grow it, they can franchise it, they can get passive income, whatever that they need to do. That's what we're there to do. And so one of the things that I heard, this was on one of our internal calls a couple of weeks ago, I just loved it. We have, our goal of creating a commercial profitable enterprise that works without you, and it provides the lifestyle that you require. So you have to think about it when you're looking to be coached, whether it's in your life or career or business. What is the lifestyle that you want to live? And what coach are you going to work with that will help extract that from you so you can get clarity on that, so that you can then design a business or reorganize a business or restructure a business to where you can have that, to where you can dream that, you can plan it out, you can learn about it, right? You can set goals around it, and then you can have somebody hold you accountable to make that happen. And it all comes down to doing the research and finding the right coach to do that, or the right organization, the right coaching firm to do that, or the right life coaching firm, or even, whatever area. You just have to ask the questions. You have to again, it comes down to, you have to educate yourself so that you can ask better questions so that you can get a better quality of outcome.
Well, as a personal testimony, I took one of your workshops, and your 90-day action plan is on my wall at home, and I look at it every day. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Have I followed everything to the T? No, but I look at it every day. It's ingrained in my head. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, big kudos to you. I mean, just think about that. That's just one small part of business coaching. You experienced one small part of business coaching was, number one, developing a plan. Not only developing a plan, but having it visually so where you can see it and then say, well, what have I accomplished? What have I not accomplished? And rearrange the timelines. And as things work, go, yeah, great. As things don't work, figure out why they didn't work, or how to do it better, or how to get, better coaching on make it better, or or read something, or, you see what I'm saying? We have so many resources at our fingertips. We're deluged with so much information that we really need to work with people that can help us make sense out of it. I mean, would an NFL football team, would they not have a head coach and an offensive coach and a defensive coach and a psychology coach and a kicking coach and a passing coach and a blocking coach? And I mean, there's so many different levels of coaching, because what coaching does, what business coaching does, it provides you as a business owner a competitive advantage over everybody else. And that's what it takes. And sports proves it. People pay thousands upon tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to improve by a half a second, to improve their decision making or what they're going to do by a quarter of a second. They invest on that level because they know it pays off. And we learn this through our education system and through our college system and through the sports world. And then we go and decide a business. It's like, I'm going to go do it on my own. So it's like, so I have to ask. So the question that we ask is, well, how's that working for you?
Well, even like the top people that are known, like publicly known, that are successful, they have coaches, they have people that are helping them. You can't do it all on your own. It's impossible. That's
right, Rich. And if you can go to anybody that you go to a big event to, whether a Tony Robbins, type, or a Grant Cardone type. I was just actually I was re-listening to a book by Grant Cardone called Sell or Be Sold. And when I was listening to it, I'm like, he made a point, and I'm like, oh, I've got a recording of what he's talking about. And he was coaching some car dealerships back in LA a long time ago. And when I dug it out and I was listening to it, and he's telling these people, he said, yep, as soon as we wrap this up here in San Diego, I'm going to go back to LA, and I've got 4 days because I'm going to work with my coach, because I'm going to plan out what I'm going to do for the next 20 years of my life. And we're taking 4 days straight, and we're going to get clarity on it, and it's going to be fun. I'm going to have a blast doing it. And it's something I don't do on my own. I reach out to real high level coaches, and I get coached. And I can tell you that everybody, no matter what success level they are, they're seeking out mentorship, they're planning, they're getting advice, they're learning, but most importantly, they're getting coached on a certain level.
Well, it comes down to, I don't know what I don't know. And at least for me, I don't know if this comes with age or a lot of feedback, but I don't know very much, honestly. so I'll take all the help I can get.
Well, it's in some cases we know more than we think we know in a lot of areas. We need somebody to pull it out of us and to say, well, why aren't you doing that? What's holding you back? Why are you going into analysis paralysis? But more importantly, have somebody direct you and direct us to learn what we need to learn at the moment and plan what we need to plan for and get clarity, so that we're not going through a longer time period of trying to figure it out, of make it happen, and run out of money or capital or get into cash gaps along the way. All these other things that, coaching is all about being on the outside looking in. When you're on the inside in your business, we're tunneling, right? And, like I have 2 coaches right now. I have a coach that I'm working with in marketing, and I have a coach that's coaching me for my coaching business. And all the time they'll just point something out. It's like, well, you're doing this and this. What if you did it this way? Or hey, reread this book, or read this book, or read this material, or I'm going to make a video for you. Watch it. Learn these fundamentals. Implement this. I want to see a plan on this. Work it out. That type of thing. You have people that push you, because if you're not getting pushed, you're most likely not going to change. And one of the things that Brad Sugars always says in our conferences and calls and everything, it's like, you know what? You want to change? You got to change. Just can't be doing the same shit. You got to change. If you don't change, nothing's going to change. And it seems so simple and pure, but I mean, it's absolutely true.
So what is your mission as a business coach? What is your mission in this life as the position you have now?
Yeah. So really mission, I'm going to change the terminology a little bit, and I'm going to say vision. Vision and purpose. As with ActionCOACH, our vision is world abundance through business reeducation. So think about that for a minute. So our vision is world abundance through business reeducation. So that means that the more successful business owners and companies and corporations on any level that we can help move to another level, we can provide more world abundance because they're going to need more people. They're going to need more team. So one of the things that I sat back in on an exercise a long time ago in one of our conferences was how many lives are you affected? And I thought about how many lives, this was a couple of years ago, I was affecting. I really wasn't affecting that many lives as compared to when we were a public company. We had like 1,200 people. And I'm like, okay, I'm affecting 1,200 people, but they have spouses or significant others. So that's 2,400 people. And if they each had a couple of sons or daughters, or let's say that they even had one, well, that's affecting, around 4,000 people. And they're buying goods and services, and they're doing so. Wow! All of a sudden, it gets up to, yeah, I'm affecting a lot of people. And then I look at our client base that are buying on television. I'm realizing, wow, we're affecting millions of people. So the thing that I'm all into in my life right now is how many people am I affecting? How many people by helping this business? Well, how many people is that going to branch out and help? And maybe somebody gets a job or an education, or they get the Game Boy that they want to get, or the TV, or they just have food to eat, or a place to live, all those kind of things. How many people am I helping through business coaching? By improving their business, by helping to improve them. What am I doing on my end to help? And that's really where I'm at now is seeing how many people that I can help improve so that I'm affecting more people in a positive manner. And that's really where my expertise lies now. And that's where my lifelong education is taking place, on just me becoming a better coach, and slapping that on top of all my world experience, whether it's good, bad, positive, or indifferent, because it's all great experience. Bad experience is great experience. Indifferent experience is great experience. Great experience is great experience. I mean, it's all great from the standpoint of that's a lifelong worth of experience and how-tos and doing what's right, doing what's wrong, and learning from it and reflecting back on it. And so I bring all that to the table, plus everything that Action Coach has, and the learnings and the conferences, and being taught how to coach business owners and people so that they can succeed. And that's really where I'm at, just affecting as many people as I can.
Well, it makes me think of a couple of things. So if you look back on human history, at least post hunter-gatherers period, 90% of the population were peasants. Do you know why 90% of the population aren't peasants anymore? Because of business, because of creating jobs and creating things, and people getting themselves out of that area. So, and I think as we move forward with the automation of everything and the AI that's going to be taking over and the algorithms, there's going to be a lot of people that are basically their jobs are gone. So we all kind of have to be business owners to a certain degree.
Sure. Well, you have to think of the way, you don't have to think about it, but the way that I think about it is that we're all business owners of ourselves. Okay. So it doesn't matter if I'm the head salesperson for a car dealership, or I work at Intel, or I work for American Express, or I work for the dairy farmer. The more skill I can get, the more education I can get, the more self-improvement I can get, the farther I'm going to be able to take myself to where I need to be. So it works on an individual level, and it works on a business owner level, whether it's, working up the ladder from being self-employed to manager to leader to entrepreneur. Because a lot of terms, and Brad reminds us of this, a lot of people will say, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. And it's like, no. You're not an entrepreneur. I hate to break your bubble right now, but you're not an entrepreneur. Until you've bought and sold businesses, until you've built businesses from the ground up, and taken them successful, and gotten yourself out of the business successfully, you're not a true entrepreneur yet. You have the true entrepreneur spirit, though. And that's what you have to remind yourself every day. So someone who really wants to be a true entrepreneur, there's a long, for some people a long, for some people short, but you have to work yourself out of every job of your business and become the true owner. And then you're an entrepreneur. That's what brings you to the entrepreneur. Until then, you have the entrepreneur spirit, and you're on that journey, and you're moving up the ladder. And the day that you stop moving up the ladder and getting advice, good quality advice, mentoring, coaching, then you'll stay at that level.
Well, thank you, Stephen. You've certainly had an impact on my life and my business. Like I said, I look at your 90-day action plan poster on my wall every day. So thank you.
Oh, that's great, Rich. Thank you very much for that.
How can people find you if they hear this and they want to hire you or look to you as a business coach? How will they find you?
Oh, sure, Rich. I'm real easy to find. The best way to find me is just go to my website, and it's realwealth123.com. And that's real as in the word real, REAL, wealth, WEALTH 123.com. Just realwealth123.com, and that'll take you to my site, and from there you can contact me right through there.
Well, thank you again, Stephen. Thank you for joining us today.
All right, Rich, I really appreciate it, and make a great week, and bye for now.
Thank you again for listening. And please leave any comments or suggestions. We're always looking for ways to improve our show and make it the best show it can possibly be. Visit mindfulaccord.com, where you can find additional episodes and you can follow our blog. We give some helpful information on mindfulness, meditation, and just ways to manage our everyday stressful lives. And most importantly, if you know of a friend or a family member that would benefit from this story, please share it with them. Until next time, I'm Rich Decker.